We are live.
Greetings to all of you who have joined us today, and welcome on behalf of the Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri Foundation to a conversation between Richard Eskow and Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri. The topic today is on the human drive to be fulfilled. Quick introductions. Richard Eskow joins us from Washington, D.C. and is a writer, host, and broadcaster of the 0 Hour on radio and TV. He's also a senior advisor for health and economic justice at Social Security. Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri is a Sufi philosopher and guide who has spent the last 40 years of his life studying and sharing what it means to be a human and how to live in harmony with all the dimensions of reality, according to also Islamic and Sufi sources. We're delighted to have them both here today, and we hope that this session will be fulfilling and interesting and enriching. Richard, I will hand over to you. Bismillah.
Shaykh Fadhlalla, as always, my warmest greetings and my gratitude for your willingness to have this conversation with us. As I was thinking beforehand about human fulfillment in this modern age, Shaykh Fadhlalla, and how, at least in my mind, to set the context for it, two things came to mind from Western popular culture. One is there's a kind of comedian slash social commentator in the United States named Lily Tomlin. And many years ago, she did this routine where she was a super successful woman. And she said, I have the greatest job, and I have the most beautiful home, and I have the most wonderful husband, the most dynamic children, and every day is filled with pursuing all these wonderful dimensions, my wonderful career. And then she says, and if I had known what it would be like to have it all, I would have settled for less. And to me, that there's also an old country and western song that says, the title is, I've enjoyed as much of this as I can stand. And I guess I mention those two things because it seems to me that we are convincing ourselves in modern life that fulfillment comes through certain kinds of pleasure, certain kinds of contentment, certain kinds of emotional relationships. We pursue all these, and yet, if anything, might feel more hollow, like Lily Tomlin, I'd have settled for less at the end of the day. So I guess is that to me feels like part of the modern condition. To what extent does that reflect your perceptions about the modern condition, and where can we go from there, I guess would be how I would start.
So long as we're thinking of going or coming or improving or excelling, we are in the earthly four-dimensional zone of space and time, which is only a preparation, a prelude, which indicates both from where we came from and to where we are leading, if there is such a thing at all. There is an absolute reality from which all realities emanate and all realities vanish. That absolute reality is not subject to space and time. For convenience, you can call it a quantum field, the absolute, the absolute, the absolute, from which everything that is relative, temporary or short-lived, or draws its energy from. The source of energy of consciousness is from supreme consciousness, is from absolute consciousness. The rest is deception. I have to deceive myself that I'm well, I'm content, I am loved, I'm successful, they like me, there is an improvement. Without hope, I will succumb to the truth that I don't exist. So we all yearn for hope, and we try to tick points to increase that pseudo-reality, that illusion, that fantasy. So we all have to convince ourselves this is the best. If it is not, then we bring in another element of tomorrow may be better. It's all fictions of the mind. It's a very simple model that I use and I share. And that is the truth. The reality is absolute and is not subject to space and time. And it is eternal and it's constant. That's the nature of my own soul. It's eternal and constant. But in this interim phase of life on earth, human being as a shadow of God on earth, as they say, we are all within the temporary and the uncertain. But the light in me is eternal and constant. So the temporary and the uncertain takes on the colors. No, it is very good. Permanent job, permanent marriage, permanent relationship, permanent abode, permanent residence. All that. We fantasize. We are all playing these illusions and we confirm it to each other, and it becomes as though becomes more real. It's all preparation. We're in a waiting room in a transition state for the absolute real. When the absolute real, there are no differentiations. There is no you, I, he, she. It is only it. And from it, everything other than it emerges and returns to. So it's not a fantasy puzzle. That is a reality. There is only that reality. That's it.
And I suppose people will hear that and they'll, on the one hand, want to know how to escape from this over-attachment to the transient, and on the other hand, wonder how they know when they're falling into that trap. And to me, we talk a lot in this day and age about addiction. And it seems to me, sometimes people refer to emotions as being addictions, that we might be addicted to love, we might be addicted to the feeling of power, we might even be addicted to negative emotions. People say that, they love drama. That person, he or she loves drama, this conflict or whatever. So is that, in other words, I guess what I'm trying to get to is, if I want to get away from this stage of thinking the waiting room is the train or the journey, if I want to rediscover this light that's always there, how do I start? Do I start by recognizing that my emotions are anchoring me in only one side of reality, or where do I go from here?
Addiction is our nature. We are addicted to life. Life is eternal. But once I personalize it, my life, then it has a beginning and an end, a birth and a death. So I can't deny my life. I can't deny that I am a custodian of life for a short while. That is why there is this amazing power within me, which will autonomically take over for me to preserve life. So 20, 30, 40% of my energy goes for that autonomic system. I'm not that reliable as a human being. So it takes over. If my finger is about to burn, the arm will withdraw. So obsession with life is my nature. All other obsessions emanate from that. Obsession for loving your children, your family, your religion, your friends, your whatever. Obsession with having the best of environmental situation. They're all obsessions, but they all emanate from one cosmic obsession, that is with life. And life is beyond us to comprehend. I can only comprehend it through the little channel I have, which is my life. And I'm obsessed by that. So it's a natural thing and nothing wrong with that. I have to accept it. I'm obsessed with life. I'm obsessed with connectedness. I'm obsessed with those who are closer to me. I'm obsessed with love. And therefore, I give it the illusion of its permanency, its eternal nature. Will you love me forever? Of course, and she says, yes, of course, forever. As she finishes the sentence, she may have a heart attack. But that's the nature of it. Anything that we, in the temporary and the uncertainty, we touch We want to make it eternal and constant. As simple as that. Eternal and constant is the nature of my soul. Temporary and uncertain is the nature of my self or ego or the animal self. It's uncertain. That's why we want insurance upon insurance upon insurance. And when it comes to real serious crisis, none of them work. So I just say, take it away. Just leave me in peace because I'm in transit. I'm about to leave all the incumbencies of body, mind, all of the other things. I feel I am about to move back into the zone of the permanent, into total consciousness, pure consciousness, not limited, conditioned, and this consciousness, sleep consciousness, fear consciousness, all of the other consciousnesses. Countless beams emanate from that pure, supreme consciousness. And that is the nature of my soul. Once I know, in truth, I owe everything to the soul, which is divine and sacred, but everything else that I experience emanates from it. I can't deny them. I can't deny pain, fear, concern, anxiety, insecurity. All of these are the negative side of the positive beams emanating from consciousness. Once you see it like that, then it's wonderful. And it is intermediate, is between the infinite and the finite, between heavens and earth. Middle people, as it's often described by Buddhists and many others, is that middle. We are between the infinite and the finite. The finite is here I am. Any minute will not repeat, but any minute has the sanctity of eternity. It has the power of eternity. That's why it is real. That's why we like to be where the thing is happening then. It has, if you like, the touch of the supreme, if you like, energy of presence. Now, now, now. Now is forever. And if you're present now, 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 then you've practiced life forever. That's why we want it now. A child doesn't want to have pleasure. Pleasure means you lose yourself a bit. You're occupied with something that's pleasurable, so you lose the anxiety of the mind, or the fear, or the concern. So you're relaxed. We love that. Because we love, actually, the most important zone is to mind being still, have no fear, have no anxiety, have no sorrow, have no regrets. Present, pure presence. If you are at that, then self, soul are in unison. They are. The soul, which is eternal and constant, nourishes the self, which is temporary and uncertain and confused. Then that's me. That is humanity, divinity. That's me. That's you. We are the same. Is the extent and frequency of calibration and referencing to the absolute and the constant. That's
So there's so much in what you said, Shaykh Fadhlalla, but part of what I get from that and absorbing from that, sometimes in spiritual traditions, you hear a lot of talk about duality versus unity. And I think what you're saying, part of what you're saying, or at least the way I'm interpreting it, is the duality is the unity. And that in terms of, some spiritual traditions put a tension between, you must not think thoughts when you're meditating or praying or whatever your practice is. Don't think thoughts. Or as you go about your daily life, trying to maintain contact with this higher, there's a higher and there's a lower, and don't be in the lower. And it almost seems to me, but please correct me, of course, if I'm wrong, it always seems to me as if what you're saying is that this transient or temporary, or what some would call the lower, is a reflection of the higher, and it's not that you combat it. There's another approach that just says, you're looking through the stained glass window at the light, you're seeing the light, you see that there's a stained glass window coloring it, and that's all okay, and that's all unified. First of all, is there any sense in that? And that's, a question I just made. And secondly, is there any truth to it, I guess?
They are seamlessly connected. In truth, duality and unity are not separate. It's in my consciousness that become separate. And my consciousness follows a spectrum of consciousness. A baby is born with sentiency, basic, if you like, consciousness. It's tabula rasa. It's not yet conscious of thing, this, that, but it is conscious. It's alive. And as time goes by, in a few months' time, begins to be conscious of what it likes and what it dislikes, and begins to shake when there is a big noise or whatever. And by the time he or she is 2-3 years old, they become more conscious. What we call the personality is developing. Personality means a veil upon pure consciousness. So the duality is like raising my hand in order to see more what is revealed by the sun. The power of the sun too immense. So I raise my hand to shield it. Pure consciousness, too immense, too powerful, is permanent, is eternal. I, who is temporary and born and will die, cannot take it. It's too much. So I shield it. Therefore, the mind is the intermediary. Pure consciousness, spiritual. It is divine, it's sacred, it's there. But for it to be realized, it has to grow within me. I am conscious of this and that. I'm conscious I like this, I don't like this. I'm conscious that this is a pleasant place or not. I'm conscious that it's too hot for me to survive, and I'm obsessed with life, so I want to have a better temperature. So until such time, your personal consciousness become nothing other than an indicator, pointer towards proving pure consciousness, which is the nature of your own soul. That's why you coexist then. The ego will coexist. The so-called I will coexist. So please excuse me, I may be a bit very abrupt today. I feel in a very bad mood. Please excuse me because the house has collapsed and my job is gone and the car didn't start. So I'm in a bad mood. So that means I am now referring to my higher consciousness to show you my conditioned consciousness for you not to be upset by it too much. I am upset, that's good enough. I don't want to upset you also. Yeah, everything collapsed, everything is wrong, nothing is working. And I even may die. Hopefully, if you are trained in unitive consciousness, supreme, then you're cheerful. You have come to go. What's a big deal? Unless if I want to punish them, no, I'm going to remain ill for 20, 30, 40 years. And all the time I say, but don't you know I am ill? And the medical industry also is very clever. They give it a name. So it becomes as though it has a reality on its own. Mm. But on a hypus maturus, it's a very special case of depression. It will come soon after this ever-living COVID, ever reinventing itself. It's the nature of the lower self, the nature of moving consciousness, changing realities, emanating from supreme, unconditional, timeless reality. That's all what it is. So I'm in between. As I grow, hopefully with experience, with wisdom, with love of life, with acknowledgement of the perfection and my love for life, then I become, no, this is temporary, all right. You have a pain in your tooth. They either will extract it or mend it. It may take a week, 2 weeks, whatever. That's it. You've had many other things as well. So this is an aspect emanating from you, but requires attention because the full you has to be as well integrated as possible. Otherwise, you won't be in touch with your higher. If there is a pain, you have to address it. It's addressing, it's calling you to give special attention to the eye or to the tooth. Until it's neutralized, it is for that reason the middle people are constantly in the middle, neither fearful of the future nor completely ruined and taken over by the past. Present, the moment is eternal, and the moment continues eternally, forever. If you're riding on that, then you're already experiencing eternity before you even have the privilege of leaving your body and mind and be liberated as a soul.
You mentioned Shaykh Fadhlalla, training in unitive consciousness as as being part of this process, and I'm wondering what are the principles behind it. If I'm quoting you correctly, this was years ago. When I started certain practices and involved repeating the names of God and so on, I was struggling between trying to maintain the meaning of the words, thinking about the meaning, and speaking them. So I said, I can't really think of, I'm not really thinking of God when I'm saying the words. And if I recall correctly, you said thinking of God is an oxymoron. But that gets me to the question of, the Japanese, some of the Zen Buddhists, for example, might say, well, you can achieve samadhi or the stilling of the mind by playing the flute or, certain practices. Other people might say, chanting, repeating, dhikr, and so on. What is that unit? Where is that state? How does that relate to, on the one hand, this everyday consciousness we all live in, and on the other, being in the zone of, let's say if you are playing the flute and you're transported and you forget I don't play the flute, but just as an example, you're transported, you're some of the Japanese Zen masters talk about. Is that what we're talking about here? Or are we talking about something that's certainly different than the everyday consciousness, but not exactly that sort of samadhi either? I'm struggling with that a little bit.
Terms and names and so on that we give for the other zone of consciousness, for the supreme zone of consciousness, for the quantum zone of consciousness, these names that we give can also mislead. The issue of the mind, quite naturally, as human beings, as we have evolved over billions of years, especially in the last few thousand years, we become more and more able to focus, more and more able to do things that even 100 years ago were inconceivable, and so on. So it is mindfulness that has been dominating. Focus, be contained, be aware. But what we are talking about is mindlessness. Put your mind back. And that is a question of correct judgment. We don't judge things correctly because we come with an opinion and it gets reinforced and the mind wants to focus and reach a conclusion. So I see the signs that confirms my fantasy or what I thought is going on, whereas it may not be. It's my own processing of the mind. So I must also practice stillness of the mind, mindlessness, no thought. Just take an excuse of whatever it is and go into it, meditate until you lose all. You lose the meditative process and lose yourself. The most enjoyable state to be in is not to have a self, to lose yourself. Deep sleep or whenever you're no longer a mind. The nature of the mind is to put cause and effect together. The nature of the mind is to produce rationality. But if I want to judge properly, if I want to be a person of sound judgment, then I must neutralize my mind to see things for what they are, read it for what it is, and relate it to space and time. Where was it? What time of the day? Where? Who was there? So space and time come into it in a very important way if I am to judge things right. And I like to judge things right because I don't want to be full of regrets, sorrows, and guilt. I don't like that. I want to be free. I want to be in the now. So you need focusing, you need presence of the mind if you're tackling things, observing, driving, thinking, inventing, needed. Focus. But if I want to be with the soul, with higher consciousness, then I have to lose specificity of consciousness. I'm no longer specifically aware of you being there or not, or the tap is running or not, or the electricity. Lose specific consciousness to pure consciousness, which contains all the specific ones. Lose it all, stop it all. The more I practice that, the more I am touching the amazing light of my own soul or my spirit, which is divine and which is eternal and which is constant, then I have no more fear of leaving my body behind or my mind behind. This is my reality has been established for me, that it is constant, eternal, and if you like, also you can call it divine and sacred. That's why thousands of years ago it was revealed to a human being, if you kill one person, out of with no correct judgment and reason, it is as though you have killed all of humanity. All the same. We're all the same. Potentially, we are all exactly the same. A sacred soul with an ever-changing, developing, modifying, culturally affected, religiously camouflaged self. I am both. I'm self-soul.
The poet William Blake, at one point in his notebooks, wrote, "Wise men see outlines, and that is why they are wise." And at another point in his notebooks, he wrote, "Madmen see outlines, and that is why they are insane." And maybe that's somehow related in the sense that there's a time to see discrimination, difference, outlines, where I end and you begin, and so on. And maybe there's a time to set all that aside and see no outlines, see just unity, and it's the ability to do both that advances us spiritually. Is there any truth in that?
There is human insanity and madness because it doesn't follow reason, it doesn't follow common, if you like, understanding or intellect. So it's odd. We look at each other to see that this fellow is acting very odd. And we wink or whatever to confirm that we are sane and this fellow is insane. So this is the norm, because we want to know, where did you leave the thing? What time is it? So we need to establish humanity. We need to establish earthly, consciousness of us. But for an enlightened being, I think the rest of so-called human beings are insane. That's why many of the great ones, they just separated themselves and they were almost in a perpetual lockdown. But they don't go around and say everybody insane. They still also connected with life and they love life, so they don't want to be beheaded. So they keep quiet. But if there are 2 or 3 people who are truly at that station, at that full station of awakening, I think I would imagine they look at each other and they know that, yes, the rest of them are. What is that? What the nature of reality? It began in a cell. It has moved a lot. So we have evolved a great deal. Even nowadays, the sense of humanity and human rights is much better than it was 50 years ago or hundreds of years. It's been great progress. But we are moving more and more towards more and more people able to stop their mind quietly and recharge with supreme consciousness in their own heart and come back. And those people will find themselves less and less being able to be in the marketplace because most of it doesn't make sense. What are they quarreling about? What's to build a bigger house and how many rooms are you going to stay in? How many beds can you sleep in? How many? So they take it to its conclusion. So they become far more modest in their needs and their requirements and their way of life and their readiness to be relieved of this amazing, human body and organs and all of that. Ready. So it's all about being ready for the true conclusion, which is pure consciousness, which is the nature of your own soul.
And you sometimes hear people, Shaykh Fadhlalla, you sometimes hear people say, well, I don't want to do that because I love people and I want to stay in contact with people. But in doing that and becoming attached to that, next thing you know, they're saying, well, but that person is not like me. You are not like me. You are something other. And your otherness bothers me, so I need to get rid of you. And pretty soon we have this world of conflict and people turning against one another. So on the one hand, you have people who theoretically, maybe you have yogis who live on a mountaintop for 120 years. Then you have people fighting down in the valley. And it seems to me with the middle way, perhaps you're talking about a happy medium where you can live in the valley or on the mountaintop, but you don't get attached to the drama of the otherness.
But the lower self, the ego self, the animal self, draws its energy from the higher self. So it's to begin with. If time goes by and I don't realize the animal in me, and I don't keep them locked up in the zoo and fed them and so on, then I remain like most other people, completely confused. As for why do I justify doing more and more and more of stupidity, anything that exists has been touched by reality, by eternity, by God. So it wants to perpetuate itself. So every nefs, every ego, every so-called personality wants to perpetuate itself and wants to justify it. And that's why you turn to people who will acknowledge what you are doing as being good. They say, no, you did the right thing. You don't feel guilty. You were right. Everybody wants approval. So this is the lower self. All of us have a touch of the lower self as long as we're alive. So it is the nature of the human being to have that warfare between the lower self and the higher self. So warfare, the higher mountain, the bottom valley is in me. The higher is my own soul, pure soul. It's the source of life, the connector to eternal life. That's the soul. But it can only be understood through its shadow, through the lower self, through the animal self, through what causes me my troubles and issues of fears, anxieties, arrogance, covetousness, greed. This is my lower self. It is the lower self, the other side of the light. Through suffering, I won't make it as my enemy. I say, look, I know you. You are the animal from which we have emerged. Please keep quiet. Thank you. I know you. Once you acknowledge the creature and you know its nature and you are deriving your constancy from the constant light in you, then you are relatively safe. Then you are in this earth, not of this earth. You are, your ancestral thing are animals and possibly even a virus. And then it come into the Adamic thing with consciousness of consciousness. And here we are. So we don't need to do anything other than acknowledge it and recognize who is the master, who is the divine light in me, God's light in me. It's my own soul. So the more I touch base with it, the less I'm likely to succumb to all of the stupidities and fantasies that we are now having the whole earth suffering from. All of the, if you like, immensely, almost irreversible situations we're in, whether it's climate change or whether it is waste or abuse, we're all suffering from it collectively. Because collectively we have allowed our lower self, the animal self, to lead. And we try to camouflage it and lie. And that's why no matter where you go, you find always some seriously wrong issues with the system, whether it's the political system, financial system, or there are faults because of the incompleteness, inadequacy. This whole thing is temporary and uncertain. But we think we want certainty in a zone of uncertainty. It's a matter of insanity. Or I want to permanentize, I'm going to give my name to the university or to a country. Or how long will it last? 5 generations all forgotten. So they want to have a new hero, to have his name. There are not enough streets in the city. So every few years they change the names. And if you are a stranger or occasional visitor, you're completely confused. This street was named that before. Oh, it was named that. 100 years, the street may have changed. So this is who we are. Temporary, uncertain, confused, desperately seeking that which is eternal and constant. That's who we are, all of us. It's the extent that you have been referring to the constant. And that is as good as you turn away from the inconstant. You can't say, oh, constant, I want you. You can say, oh, flaky changing. It's enough. I've followed those notions and they were all wrong. Thank you. So turning away from what is not will naturally put us closer to that which is.
And when we talk about the drive to for human fulfillment, one of the things I've noticed is that when people start to get around my age, we live in a society, an economic system that obligates most people to work, to have a career, and some jobs, fewer and fewer, but some jobs, some situations allow people to retire. And so they reach what used to be called retirement age in any case. And it's interesting to see what happens in terms of this drive for human fulfillment, because you see some people say, at last, I can just go fishing every day. You see, if people have made a bit of money, they go travel constantly and they go to the best restaurants all around the world. And then you see other people who, if they don't have to go to an office anymore, they kill themselves. Their life no longer has meaning. And so, these different definitions of human fulfillment, well, contentment, right? Just with the fishing pole or whatever it might be, or pleasure with the traveling around the world, or meaning and purpose, which is continuing to go to the job. Where does, since our theme today was the drive for human fulfillment, where do these insights you're sharing fit in with that, which can occur at any stage of life, even if you're working, not working, that definition of what it means to be striving at any age for fulfillment?
Brilliant. At this zone where we are, of space and time, duality, multiplicity, plurality, countless themes that indicate, or for individual set of mind, say this is more fulfilling. You have more money, more power, more leisure, more fishing, more whatever, more whatever. So this is all within this zone. My soul or my spirit, which is my source, is beyond fulfillment or non-fulfillment. It's utterly constant, eternal. So we are in this box of good, bad, up, down, happy, unhappy, fulfilled, unfulfilled. So that's why we are battling. Not until you begin to touch the zone which is beyond this, which is the source of this, which is the quantum field from which life emerges, eternally life, not temporary life with a birth and death. Once you're touched upon that, your inner nature is spirit or a soul, and it is eternally content, then your search for outer fulfillment will become less and less until it stops. Until this is temporary, is not interesting. You've been there thousands of times. So fulfillment is pseudo temporary, and at the lower level of consciousness, at the human level of consciousness, all emanating from supreme consciousness, which is ever fulfilled. But it doesn't, you can't say my soul is fulfilled, because it implies that maybe some occasions that is not fulfilled. The soul is another zone which is not subject to space and time. And the same thing as you and I, we're subject to that.
It almost sounds, Shaykh Fadhlalla, as if almost sounds like a paradox, as if the search for fulfillment is actually the search for a state of illusion, and that the fulfillment comes when you recognize that you're not on a search for fulfillment. Am I right that there's a kind of paradoxical quality to this?
There is, but also there is a clear connection. If I want to excel in anything, in an earthly endeavor, so I want to make it more efficient, less wasteful, more durable, more likable, and so on, so on, so on. Until such time I get a formula for that particular activity, it works maybe 99%. So that endeavor is fulfilled. So it is a question of it. Say it is, and it is there. So there is, if you like, a touch of paradox. Paradox is all my life. Here I want to be sharp, clear, aware, I want to be focused, focused, focused. And yet I love deep sleep. Isn't that a paradox? So, I mean, all of this is part. Our life is full of contradictions, you know, because it's an illusion, but has emanated from the eternal truth, leading back to the eternal truth. So in between, it is paradoxical, it's confusing, it is nonsensical. It's nonsensical. Trying this, trying that, more this, and eventually they put you in a grave, and few people have benefited from you all walk around looking as though they are upset. Upset for what? It's naturally going to die. To celebrate it, that has happened, and that's it. We're not honest enough, nor have we enough courage. Lack of honesty, lack of courage. Because others, I don't want to upset them because they will be they. Let them be. The issue of they and I, or the otherness. The otherness is on the outer. Everybody is not this. I am not the same as I was an hour ago. Change, 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 change. But the inner state, we all want fulfillment that's durable. That's where the otherness vanishes. We're all the same. We're all the same, Homo sapiens, wanting to be certain, secure, content. And that can only come with as good a constancy of my referencing to my inner reality, which is a spirit or a soul that is heavenly, appearing on earth in this form. That's all.
And I suppose our last category of questions has to do with, at the end of when one gets closer to this state of being, where service to others and community and all of that falls in. I like to think that my work is of some benefit to others, but I'm not vain enough to think that if I stopped it tomorrow, that both the universe and I wouldn't continue. They would. Both of us would probably be fine. But people often, I think, when they're looking at spiritual paths, when they're trying to figure out how to advance themselves, fulfill themselves, to use that word, want to know where the idea of service and those ideas fit into it. They don't want to just go off and be their own little world. And how does that relate to what we're talking about?
Service has many dozens of, if you like, steps in it. It's like a ladder. The first one is to do, and second and the third, maybe even more, to do with empathy. You know, you hear somebody screaming, you hear yourself potentially screaming, so you lend a hand. It's empathy, it is connecting in an emotional level with others. It's all about connection. The entire existence of consciousness is based on connectedness. Connectedness implies continuity. So the more you are connected, the more you feel a bit more secure, because I'm connected with everybody, I can call anybody anytime, and so on and so on. But if it also the continuity of it is timelessness of it, and the eternal nature of it gives us greater security. Service is unavoidable. You know, you can't help it. With intellect, with reason, with reflection, you become more and more and more service-oriented. Because the less there is of you, the less you care for yourself, the more content you can be. Because how much can you serve yourself? How much can you eat? How much can you rest? How much can you have fun? Whatever. Endless. Doesn't work. So you say, no, I am going to take another, if you like, channel of access to contentment, and that is help, serve, give. Give that which you want to keep. That's a difficult one. But it goes on and on and on until you are completely flowing in the Zen, if you like, perfection of time itself. You're not anymore, I'm now going to serve, I'm going to give, I'm going to be selfish now because it's a business like. It's a flow for you. That's why most people in the hard businesses, they're very hard people. They never attain, if you like, genuine contentment and happiness or love, because it's all measured. Whereas love is a flow. Give that which you want to keep. Give your life. The love of the mother, the love of the unconditional love is for its own sake. You're liberated in a sense, or you touch the experience of being liberated from the so-called you. We love that. So it's for my own sake. If I am to serve selflessly, unconditionally, it's for my real sake, for my higher sake.
Is there an aspect of awareness to this as well, in the sense that if I lessen my attachment to myself, perhaps I'm absorbing more of the interplay of forces around me, so that if I have this Apple product here, perhaps it comes more naturally that I'm aware that people built this perhaps under very difficult or deadly situations in China or what have you, and that maybe I do something about it, maybe I don't, but that carrying that awareness makes it more likely that I'll react spontaneously and compassionately. If I meet my member of Congress, I say, listen, I'm worried about what they're doing to the workers. And so I guess that's my question, is awareness a dimension of this?
Initially, it is with that, like a child giving something that he or she wanted to eat, give it to somebody. So the mother or the parents will approve of the child. You did very well. I know you wanted to eat it, but you gave it. Well done. So initially, it is, I'm aware that I gave that I wanted to keep. That's why also, if I wasn't thanked enough, I said, dreadful, I'm so stupid. I gave it to them, they didn't appreciate it. And on and on and on. Eventually, the issue of giving, there is no longer the so-called you in it, the self or the ego interpreting it or giving you marks. It's no longer. It's your nature. The nature of your own soul or spirit is to give. When did you negotiate to be given life? Its nature, the nature of God, that's why we say, is that of absolute generosity. So, and the Quran also encourages people to say, take on the color of God. Give it as though it's not you. And then it becomes a habit and becomes a liberator. And then you flow with the situation which has got physical, material, and also emotional and light, all of it together. So to begin with, yes, you're aware of giving and you'll be upset if they didn't appreciate it, and so on and so on. But eventually, it is a liberator of the animal self, the lower self, the marsupial. That's it. So it becomes the real you, which is a soul.
And then I suppose on a more mundane level, I can be aware of what's happening to the factory workers without becoming that kind of person who's so proud that he knows what's happening to the factory workers, that he lectures other people. Don't you know what we're doing? Which doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the factory workers or the person or the people he's lecturing. So it has that, in my view anyway, that side benefit as well. Well, Shaykh Fadhlalla, I've taken a lot of your time. Everyone listening has taken your time. Is there any question I wasn't insightful enough to ask that you'd like to address on this subject before we conclude?
We are who we are, sublime and ridiculous. And you have to be honest where you are. It's a whole spectrum of consciousness. Be honest, the point where you are. You are at a point that you wanted to be admired and you were not. Express it. Say, I came here wanting to be clapped for, and you didn't. Oh God, maybe say it and laugh at yourself. The more people reveal their inner state, the more they increase in popularity. The more you declare your ignorance, really, and laugh at it, the more people say, oh my God, he's so honest. Honesty is the pathway, the highway of liberating yourself from the so-called self. It ends up being at the soul. That we are all the same, we're all soul. So the factory worker, poor fellow, he has to struggle in order to maintain, if you like, physical well-beingness, to eat, to have medication, obsessed with preserving life. Once life had touched, it, in a way, has to be preserved. So you reciprocate. But equally, if the factory worker knows that the owner regards him or her essentially as the same, as a spirit, as a soul, I tell you, there will be an X factor in that factory. They will accept their humble situation. They accept their, difficult, but they know that they are treated with respect, treated with if you like, spiritual equality. Makes a huge difference. So that's, I think, the whole story. And people can move faster or slower according to the extent of their honesty. As an animal, as a human being, I can never be fulfilled. It's never enough, nothing. My greed cannot never end. But once I touch the light, all of the shadows disappear. And I am present in the moment, and the moment is eternal. Very simple. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Shaykh Fadhlalla, and thank you to everyone, Abbas, Muna, and everyone who brought us together.
Thank you very much. Go well, go well. Salam.
Thank you very much for spending time cultivating these questions that really probed the depths of this whole self-soul unison, which Shaykh Fadhlalla often talks about. He makes it sound so simple and easy. So we do need people like you, Richard, to pull at these so-called unified little balls of threads, all these beautiful silk threads that we need to understand. It's been a very helpful discussion, especially the distinction between losing the specificity of personal consciousness in order to touch full supreme consciousness. And I hope and pray that we can all find ways and inspiration from this conversation today to be able to do that ourselves. And I also appreciated very much that the essence of service is to give that which you want to keep, and that being a little portal to self-transformation and, of course, honesty. Thank you very much, both of you, for sharing these pearls of wisdom. And on behalf of the Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri Foundation, I'm happy that you all joined us today. Do subscribe to our channel and click that little bell so you get reminders for future gatherings and don't get caught at the last second. Sometimes we're a little late with making these announcements. But thank you very much. Thank you to the team behind the scenes. Thank you, Shaykh Fadhlalla, and thank you, Richard Eskow. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.